Welcome back to the Discipline Code. I'm your host, and if you listened to episode 1, you already know the premise of this show. Discipline is not a personality trait, it's a system. It's something you build, brick by brick, day by day. Today, we're going deeper. We're going back to the beginning. Not the beginning of a career, not the beginning of a championship run, but the beginning of a life shaped by commitment. We're going back to the mat. Imagine a 7-year-old walking into a martial arts gym for the first time. The floor is hard. The room smells like sweat and effort. There are older kids throwing kicks that look impossible. The instructor doesn't smile much. There's no trophy waiting at the end of the first class. There's no applause. There's just the mat and the choice. That choice to stay, to come back the next day, and the day after that is where discipline begins. Not in a motivational speech, not in a book, not even in this podcast. It begins in the quiet decision a child makes when no one is watching and no one is keeping score. This is the story of what happens when someone makes that choice at 7 years old and never stops. This is episode 2, the 7-year-old on the mat. Before we talk about martial arts, let's talk about the brain. Because what happens inside a child's mind during those early years is nothing short of extraordinary. A child's brain is, in the most literal sense, under construction. By the age of 6, the human brain has already reached about 90% of its adult volume, but size isn't the story. The story is connections. During early childhood, there are roughly 50% more connections between neurons than exist in the adult brain. The brain is essentially overbuilt, wired with far more pathways than it will ultimately need, and it's waiting for experience to decide which connections to keep and which to prune away. This process is called neuroplasticity, and it's the reason why what a child does between the ages of 5 and 12 matters so profoundly. The activities a child engages in during this window don't just create memories. They literally shape the architecture of the brain. Neural pathways that are used repeatedly become stronger, faster, more efficient. Pathways that are neglected fade away. Think about that for a moment. When a 7-year-old steps onto a martial arts mat and begins learning to focus, to control impulses, to follow instructions, to get back up after being knocked down, those aren't just life lessons. Those are neural pathways being carved into the physical structure of the brain. And the earlier those pathways are established, the deeper they run. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for self-control, planning, and decision-making, doesn't fully mature until around age 25. That's a well-established finding in developmental neuroscience. But that doesn't mean children can't develop self-control. It means the opposite. Because the prefrontal cortex is still developing, it's especially responsive to training. Early structured practice doesn't just teach discipline. It accelerates the development of the very brain region that makes discipline possible. So when we talk about starting young, we're not talking about pushing children into competition before they're ready. We're talking about giving the brain the raw material it needs to build the systems that will serve a person for the rest of their life. Now you might be thinking, that sounds nice in theory, but is there actual proof that early self-control leads to better outcomes in adulthood? The answer is yes, and the proof is overwhelming. One of the most important studies ever conducted on this topic is the Dunedin Multidisciplinary Health and Development Study, a 40-year longitudinal research project that followed over 1,000 children born between 1972 and 1973 in Dunedin, New Zealand. The study was led by psychologists Terry Moffat, Richie Poulton, and Avshalom Caspi, and the results were published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Here's what makes this study remarkable. The researchers assessed each child's self-control during their first decade of life, from age 3 to age 11, using evaluations from teachers, parents, trained observers, and the children themselves. Then they followed those children for the next 3 decades. What they found was striking. Children with higher self-control grew into adults with better physical health, greater financial stability, stronger relationships, and lower rates of criminal behavior. Children with lower self-control were more likely to struggle with substance abuse, debt, unemployment, and chronic health problems. And here's the part that silences every skeptic. These results held true regardless of intelligence and regardless of socioeconomic background. Whether a child came from a wealthy family or a poor one, whether they had a high IQ or an average one, self-control in childhood predicted adult outcomes with remarkable consistency. The researchers described it as a step change. At every level of self-control, there was a measurable improvement in life outcomes. 95% of the original participants were still in the study at age 38. That's an almost unheard of retention rate in longitudinal research, which means these findings aren't based on a small, self-selected group. They represent a near complete picture of an entire generation. The Dunedin study didn't just suggest that early self-control matters, it proved it. Across health, wealth, relationships, and even criminal behavior, the discipline a child develops in their first decade of life echoes through every decade that follows. You've probably heard of the marshmallow test. It's one of the most famous experiments in the history of psychology, and it's directly relevant to what we're talking about today. In 1970, psychologist Walter Mischel at Stanford University designed a simple but brilliant experiment. He placed a marshmallow in front of a young child, typically around 4 or 5 years old, and made an offer. You can eat this marshmallow right now, or if you wait 15 minutes without eating it, you'll get 2 marshmallows instead. Then the researcher left the room. Some children ate the marshmallow immediately. Some lasted a few minutes, and some waited the full 15 minutes. What made this experiment legendary wasn't the test itself, it was the follow-up. Mischel and his colleagues tracked these children over the following decades. In the original study, children who waited the full 15 minutes scored, on average, 210 points higher on the SAT than children who ate the marshmallow right away. By their late 20s and early 30s, those who had demonstrated the ability to delay gratification showed better social and cognitive functioning overall. Now, it's important to note that later research, particularly a 2018 conceptual replication by Tyler Watts and colleagues, which has been cited over 660 times, found that the effects were smaller when you controlled for socioeconomic factors like family income and parental education. That's a fair and important nuance. Environment matters. Resources matter. But even in that replication, the basic correlation between early self-control and later outcomes still held. But here's the part of the marshmallow test that most people miss, and it's the part that matters most for this podcast. Mischel didn't just study which children could wait, he studied how they waited. And what he found was that the children who successfully delayed gratification weren't simply tougher or more naturally disciplined. They used strategies. Some covered their eyes so they couldn't see the marshmallow. Some turned their chairs around. Some sang songs to themselves. Some invented games. They didn't overpower temptation with raw willpower. They designed systems to manage it. That is the core insight of the discipline code. Discipline is not about being born with some iron will that other people lack. It's about learning strategies, systems that help you navigate the gap between impulse and intention. And the earlier you learn those strategies, the more deeply they become part of who you are. A 7-year-old on a martial arts mat is learning exactly this. When the instructor says, "Hold that stance for 30 more seconds," and every muscle is screaming to quit, the child who stays isn't necessarily the strongest. The child who stays is the one who has learned to focus on their breathing, to count in their head, to find a point on the wall and lock their eyes onto it. They've learned a system, and that system becomes a part of them. There's something unique about martial arts as a vehicle for building discipline in children, and it's worth understanding why. Most youth sports teach teamwork, physical fitness, and the basics of competition. Those are valuable, but martial arts does something different. It combines physical training with explicit philosophical and ethical instruction in a way that very few other activities do. Research published in the journal Frontiers in Pediatrics found that martial arts training in children and young people positively influences not just physical fitness, but also mental health, self-regulation, and character development. A separate review noted that martial arts may help reduce behavioral problems in children, in part because the training environment demands a level of focus and self-control that transfers to other areas of life. Think about what a child experiences in a typical martial arts class. They bow when they enter the training space. They address their instructor with respect. They follow a structured sequence of warm-ups, drills, and techniques. They practice the same movements over and over until the movements become automatic. They spar with partners, which means they experience both winning and losing in a controlled, supervised environment. And at the end of class, they bow again. Every element of that experience is teaching something. The bowing teaches humility and respect for the space and the people in it. The repetition teaches patience and the value of incremental improvement. The sparring teaches emotional regulation, how to manage fear, frustration, and aggression in real time. The belt system teaches goal setting and the satisfaction of earned progress. No classroom lecture can replicate that. No textbook can teach a child what it feels like to get hit, to want to quit, and to choose to keep going anyway. This is what psychologist Carol Dweck would call a natural growth mindset environment. Dweck's research, published across 6 landmark studies, demonstrated that children who are praised for effort rather than intelligence develop greater task persistence, more enjoyment of challenges, and better performance over time. In martial arts, effort is the only currency. You don't get a belt for being talented. You get a belt for showing up, training hard, and demonstrating that you've put in the work. The entire system is built around praising and rewarding the process, not the outcome. And that's why martial arts, when introduced early, can be so transformative. It doesn't just teach a child how to throw a punch or execute a kick. It teaches them how to relate to difficulty itself. It teaches them that struggle is not a sign of failure, it's the mechanism of growth. On this show, we draw from the real experience of a martial artist who stepped onto the mat at age 7 and never left. By 10, he was competing. In his teens, he was representing his country in European tournaments. Over the course of 54 professional fights, 40 wins, 13 losses, and 1 draw, he earned the title of 2-time Muay Thai Z1 World Champion. But none of that started with the championship. It started with a 7-year-old on a mat. What does a child learn in those early years of training? Not technique, not really. Technique comes later, refined over thousands of hours of what Anders Ericsson, in his landmark 1993 paper, cited over 17,000 times, called deliberate practice, structured, intentional repetition with feedback designed to push performance beyond its current limits. What a child learns first is something more fundamental. They learn that showing up matters. They learn that the instructor's approval is earned, not given. They learn that the other kids in the gym are not enemies, they're training partners, and you need them to get better. They learn that getting knocked down is not the end of anything, it's the beginning of the next round. These lessons don't stay on the mat. They follow you into the classroom, into the workplace, into relationships, into every difficult conversation and every hard decision for the rest of your life. The same discipline that kept a 7-year-old coming back to training is the same discipline that later drove him to climb the highest peaks in Africa and South America, to spend years teaching children with disabilities how to swim, climb, and build confidence through movement, and to build a life defined not by trophies, but by the quiet, consistent work that no one sees, but that makes all the difference. That's what starting young really means. It doesn't mean starting early so you can win sooner. It means starting early so the foundation runs deeper. Now, I know some of you listening didn't start at 7. Maybe you didn't start at 17. Maybe you're 30, 40, 50, and you're wondering if this episode even applies to you. It does, and here's why. The Dunedin study, the same one we discussed earlier, found something remarkable when they looked at adolescents who improved their self-control during their teenage years. Even those who had low self-control as young children but improved during adolescence showed better adult outcomes than those who didn't improve. The researchers specifically noted that self-control is not fixed. It can be developed at any stage of life. Remember what we said about neuroplasticity? While the brain is most plastic during childhood, it retains the ability to form new neural connections throughout life. The pathways might take longer to establish in adulthood, but they can still be built. The 66-day average for habit formation that we discussed in episode 1, that applies whether you're 7 or 70. The advantage of starting young is depth. The advantage of starting now is that you're starting. And starting is always better than waiting. So if you're listening to this and thinking, I wish someone had put me on a mat at 7, I hear you. But the mat is still there. The system still works. The code still applies. The question isn't when you start. The question is whether you'll stay. Here's your assignment for this episode. It's simple and it connects directly to what we've been talking about. I want you to identify one area of your life where you've been relying on motivation instead of structure. Maybe it's fitness, maybe it's a creative project, maybe it's a difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Now, I want you to design one small system around it. Not a goal, not a resolution, a system. Something you can do every single day that removes the need for willpower. If it's fitness, lay out your workout clothes the night before. If it's writing, Set a timer for 15 minutes and write. No editing, no judgment, just words on a page. If it's that difficult conversation, write down 3 things you want to say and practice saying them out loud. The 7-year-old on the mat didn't decide to become a world champion. He decided to show up for class. The system took care of the rest. Build your system, show up for it, and come back next week. That's episode 2 of the Discipline Code. Next time, in episode 3, 54 Rounds with Life, we're going to talk about what a professional fight record teaches you about resilience and why the number of times you've been knocked down matters far less than the number of times you've gotten back up. Until then, remember, discipline isn't born, it's built, and the best time to start building was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. This has been the Discipline Code. Stay disciplined.